G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. As people who watch my channel would know, I've recently been in Korea working as part of my professorial adjunct duties. I went to a conference, and in Korea they have a similar problem to what we have. Population decline and inequality, particularly in a regional sense in rural areas, and they have a solution. It's a solution I proposed back in 2017, but they intend on doing it. So in this video, I'll outline what's going on and what Australia can learn from it all. So what's their problem? It's a little bit different to ours, but there's a lot of similarities too. They've got population decline. Well, we don't have that because of immigration. They have an aging population. Yes, we do with the boomer population. They also have the population moving to the urban centres. Essentially, Incheon, Seoul is absolutely full to the brim, and the rural areas are emptying. And that's certainly the case in Australia. I live in a rural area myself, and I know that that's the case. People are moving because there's more work opportunities in the cities, there's better infrastructure, and in Australia at least, the local government taxes are actually less as a percentage of unimproved land value than what they are in the city than what they are in the country. So in the countryside in Australia, you get to pay more tax and you get lower level services. There's less work opportunities. It's not surprising people are moving out of the country. Hang on, I'll tell you what Korea's proposed to do about it. Now, their problem's a little bit more extreme than ours, and it's further complicated by the political instability in the region and the security issue. They can't have vast tracts of their land empty like we do, because that poses a military risk to the nation. So what they've decided to do is to embark on a program of radical decentralization, where more and more of the functions of government are going to leave the central government and go down to the level of local government. Now, I actually proposed this back in 2017 in Australia for the very good reason that if you decentralize functions, we know for a fact, it is an absolute undeniable fact based on Wallace Oates' decentralization theorem, that if you decentralize functions, they will be at least as efficient, but probably far more efficient than if you centralize them. So you're gaining there through efficiency, through technical efficiency. You're gaining because it allows products to be tailored to the differences in taste. A lot of the political instability we have in nations at the moment is about different perspectives on how things ought to be, and they're often regionally focused. And when you try to impose a uniform central perspective on things, you're going to have discontent. But more importantly, those key public service positions sitting in centralized government, when they're decentralized, those people move out into the decentralized areas. So do their family, and so do their large incomes, which come with a multiplier effect, which offer a potential large boost to local economies. So, very brave move. I'm not aware of it being done at this radical level anywhere else in the world. Similar problems to us. It'll be really interesting to watch how it pans out. And that's the solution to a lot of Australia's problems. We're a unique nation. Most of our population lives in Melbourne, Canberra, Brisbane and Sydney. We have a first world nation in those capital cities, and the rest of the nation, as I say, is paying higher taxes and receiving, in many cases, the standard of services that we actually provide foreign funding to third world nations so that they can improve them for their citizens. So another way of saying it, we pay above average taxes in rural areas in Australia, and we're receiving often services below the standards offered in third world nations. We wonder why people are leaving the country. Well, that's one of the problems. You're hardly wanting to stay in a rural area, pay more tax, get lower services, and have less job opportunities. It's hardly surprising our population is dwindling. But at the end of the day, it poses the same development threat to this country. We saw in COVID, it poses a health threat. Moses Maimonides acknowledged that and noticed that 600-700 years ago, that if you agglomerate all your people in capital cities, it poses a significant threat in terms of pestilence. We saw that in COVID. It poses a lot of stress on the infrastructure, and extremely expensive infrastructure when you have to retrofit it to inner city areas. There's a lot of reasons to promote decentralization. The problem is we don't have governments with the foresight to actually see that it'd be beneficial. It also poses the same threat that it does to Korea. Having vast tracts of land with no one in poses a military threat as well. I proposed this back in this book that you can see up on the screen back in 2017, that we need to decentralise, and people say we don't have the competence and the capacity and the revenue in local government. Well, if these functions were decentralised out of Canberra, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, and those people were sitting in the local government areas and the funding came with the responsibilities, of course we would. That's a very flawed argument that's been used against it. The main reason why we won't have this happen in Australia, apart from the lack of political foresight by successive Australian governments, which is why we've plummeted from #1 nation in the world prior to World War I to where we are and barely clinging onto the G20 now, is our constitution. It's really hard to bypass the states under our constitution. Every time we try to make small amendments to the constitution, we inevitably fail, and that's probably our biggest stumbling block. But it will be really interesting to see how successful the Koreans are at this, and I think we should learn from it. The theory and the economics are pretty straightforward. Decentralization is the way to go. It's the political will and how you do it with our unworkable, badly out-of-date constitution, which would be the stumbling block. But very, very interesting to learn from what's happening overseas, and I'll be producing a video shortly on what happened in Japan too when I was over there working. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.